Hello and welcome to Newscentre with me, Parikshit Luthra. With a promise to lead a government that will not leave the next generation with the debt to settle, restore trust and lead the nation into the future, Rishi Sunak has succeeded Liz Truss as the Prime Minister of the UK. And let's tell you more about the man of the moment. Rishi Sunak is the youngest UK Prime Minister in 200 years. Born in Southampton on the 12th of May 1980, his grandparents had migrated from Gujranwala, part of Punjab in pre-partition India, to East Africa. His parents lived in Tanzania and Kenya before migrating to Southampton in 1960. Remember, Sunak began his career as an analyst with Goldman Sachs till 2004. He joined TCI Fund Management in 2006 and became partner. In 2010, he joined the Conservative Party and began working with a political think tank linked to the Conservatives. In 2015, he was elected as Conservative MP from Richmond, North Yorkshire. A firm believer in Brexit, he voted 3 times in favour of Theresa May's Brexit plans, served as Chancellor of the Exchequer from 2020 to 2022 before he resigned. Improving the odds for the Conservatives will be one of his biggest challenges. According to a YouGov poll, 65% of Britons think that Labour will form the next government, and 51% actually feel that Labour will win the next general election with a majority. Putting the economy on track will be a daunting task for Sunak, with UK staring at a recession and the economy likely to contract in Q4. Inflation is at double digits at 10.1%, highest in 40 years. The high energy bills and rising food costs are a big concern for the public in the UK. Sunak is likely to take measures to calm the market, stabilise the pound. We will also see his economic vision being unveiled when the government lays out its economic plan on the 31st of October. We'll be discussing all of that. But what is remarkable is that this young man has become the Prime Minister with just 7 years in the UK government. Let's listen in to Rishi Sunak when he was speaking just at 10 Downing Street a short while back.
I will unite our country, not with words, but with action. I will work day in and day out to deliver for you. This government will have integrity, professionalism, and accountability at every level. Trust is earned, and I will earn yours.
All right, that was Rishi Sunak. He also said that he will correct some of the mistakes made by Liz Truss and he will focus on unity. I'm now joined by Shashi Tharoor, Congress MP in the Lok Sabha and a renowned author, also the former Minister of State for External Affairs. Mr. Tharoor, thank you very much for joining us. How would you sum up Rishi Sunak's rise in UK politics and his road ahead?
Well, I think it's extraordinary at multiple levels, Parikshit. It's extraordinary in terms of the fact that he is obviously a descendant of immigrants of a different ethnicity and race from the majority of English people, British people, and that is wonderful. That's a remarkable achievement. Second, there is the undeniable fact of his religion. He's practicing Hindu, very overt in his Hinduism, which is a surprise in a Britain which has an established church. Christianity is the official religion of the state as practiced by the Anglican Church. Third is the stunning fact of his age and experience. He was only elected for the first time in 2015. Within 3 years, he was a parliamentary undersecretary. Within 5 years, he was finance minister. Within 7 years, he's prime minister. I mean, you can't imagine such a narrative in India, where he'd be lucky at the end of 7 years to be having moved up from the backbenchers to be an MOS or something, but otherwise he'd be a backbencher. That's how our country is. I mean, I've just been through the experience of being considered inexperienced because I've only 14 years in elected politics. So you can imagine how, for us, these are all very valuable lessons we can learn, I think, that a country like Britain was able to do this. And one final point is it's undoubtedly linked to his ability and his merit, because Britain's just weathered a terrible financial crisis. The economy is in the doldrums. People are gripped by a sense of crisis and doom. The Prime Minister has resigned after the shortest tenure in history of any Prime Minister. And they're desperately looking for a safe pair of hands to handle the economy. And
Right.
here you have a guy who's worked on Wall Street, worked in the city, been a hedge fund manager, and had a pretty decent record as Chancellor of the Exchequer when he was credited with some of the innovative measures through which England managed the COVID lockdown and still protected jobs and industry. And so people, I think, in the Conservative Party told themselves, either we go for this guy and we overlook race, religion, age, whatever, and we leave it to him to stabilize the economy, or we have to face a general election in which we'll get clobbered because Labour Party is so far ahead in the polls.
Right.
That, I think, was the ultimate political choice they had to make, and they chose Rishi Sunak.
Right. If you had to describe the major political challenges for him that lie ahead, in his opening speech, in his opening remarks to his party men and also to the media, he said unity and stability were two of the words that he mentioned. Do you feel that he will face issues in keeping the party united, in moving forward with his economic agenda as well? Because you have Boris Johnson's loyalists on one hand. The Labour Party is saying that he does not have the mandate, he does not have the credibility, and there needs to be a general election immediately. So do you feel that there will be a political struggle for him going ahead?
No, I mean, there's obviously going to be political challenges, but the Labour Party calling for an election is predictable. They got clobbered in the last election, and they would rather not have to wait the full 5 years before the next election, whereas from the Conservative point of view, they want to use their rather good mandate and their good majority in the House to give themselves a better chance of coming back in 25. So my own view is that that call for an election is not going to be heeded by anyone, at least not in the short term. Sunak's first and most urgent priority is to stabilize the economy. And there, I think the verdict will be coming from three sections of opinion. One is Parliament itself, in particular his own party. The second is public opinion. And the third is the markets. If the markets rally behind him and say, okay, we've got somebody we trust to handle the economy, and on that basis, you see some encouraging signs coming out of the sort of numbers that are so indispensable for judging the value of the pound, for judging the interest rates, for judging how people are able to cope with their daily lives, then Sunak will buy himself a lengthier honeymoon. In the short term, I'm sure he does have a honeymoon. The political challenge, first of all, is really within his own party, much more than from the Labour Party. And that is that there is going to be a sense that some of the traditionalists among the Conservatives, who will probably never fully feel that Rishi Sunak is British enough for them, will be lying in wait for some sort of mistake, some sort of blunder that they can then go for the jugular. And amongst those, I'm sorry to say, would probably be his old boss, the man who promoted him to Chancellor of the Exchequer and backed him very strongly at the beginning, Boris Johnson, because Boris Johnson has evidently concluded that Rishi's departure from the Chancellorship of the Exchequer was what made his own resignation unavoidable. And therefore, there is a sense in the Johnson camp that Sunak betrayed Johnson, despite owing everything to Johnson, and that therefore the perception is that the Johnson camp will be waiting to go after him if he fails.
Right.
But I think Rishi Sunak has shown a tremendous amount of skill and adeptness at being able to manage all of these contradictions so far. And my own view is that I would probably back him to be able to pull this off in the short term.
Right.
Whether at the end of 2 years or 2.5 years, this is going to be enough to overcome the 38-point deficit in the public opinion polls that separate Conservative and Labour right now, that remains to be seen.
Right.
I think that Liz Truss's resignation was something the Conservative Party demanded because it was the price of their survival.
Right.
Rishi Sunak will be held to the standards of, if you are able to do a good enough job in the economy that most of us have a chance of being re-elected, we'll back you all the way. That's his task, if you really want to have it in a nutshell.
All right. That's an important point. He needs to get the economic agenda absolutely right, make sure that public opinion is with the Conservatives, and he can allay concerns of the opposition in Parliament as well. Mr. Tharoor, I'd also like to ask you, we've seen the rise of Indian origin politicians across the world, most notably Kamala Harris as Vice President of the United States could well be the Democrat candidate for the next presidential election. And now you have Rishi Sunak as the Prime Minister of the UK. What does this say about the rise of Indians in politics across the world?
you've actually left out two other examples. There's a Goan Prime Minister in Portugal, Antonio Costa, and we had a half-Indian Prime Minister in Ireland, Leo Varadkar, who's due, as part of a power-sharing arrangement, is due to come back to power as Prime Minister by the end of the year. So we're going to have the most extraordinarily, unexpected situation of an Indian origin Prime Minister in Britain negotiating with a half-Indian origin Prime Minister in Ireland on Anglo-Irish issues, including some of the ones that have been caused by Brexit and the complications across the Irish Sea for Northern Ireland. So it's an extraordinary situation, and I must say, for all of us who, as Indians, have witnessed the sort of colonial legacy close up and also studied it and written about it, it sort of sends a post-colonial frisson up my spine to watch all of these things happening. I think the diaspora has done remarkably well. I think in some ways it's true that those who emigrate abroad, by definition, are the harder workers, the people with greater ambition, the greater desire to succeed. They have to scale impossible odds in order to do well. And that's why perhaps they succeed so much, and not just in politics, the four examples you and I have talked about, but look at the others, the famous examples of a Satya Nadella at Microsoft, or a Sundar Pichai at Google, and the many, many other Indians who are heading so many top-notch American corporations, from Indra Nooyi at PepsiCo to Raj Subramaniam at FedEx. You've got a whole lot of Indians who are running the show because they had what it takes to demonstrate the ability to succeed. All that you need in the receiving society is a willingness to recognize merit and ability ahead of race and religion. And that's where Indians have been able to benefit in every case.
Right. Also, this is a question that is often asked whenever we see the rise of an Indian politician in the West or any other country for that matter. Will ties with India be any better under Rishi Sunak?
You know, it's difficult to say. I mean, I think he has certainly got a very recent tie in the shape of his wife, who is an Indian citizen, and his in-laws are Indians, and they came and campaigned for him when he was running for parliament for the first time, and so on. So there is a close link there. But policies are made in the interest of your own country. It was pointed out to me that Rishi Sunak always cheers the England cricket team in matches against India, and so he should. He's a British politician, born and raised in Britain, and that's where his loyalties have to lie. So I think there will be a certain affinity, a certain interest, a certain friendship towards us, but I don't think it would be right for us to expect that policies would be made by any British Prime Minister merely to sort of be nice to the country of his origin. We haven't seen this. You're going to see feel-good moments. He might come to a Pravasi Bharatiya Divas, he might come to a Republic Day, who knows? But he may not be likely to come to give us concessions on a trade agreement, to give us concessions on a defense deal or whatever, because there he has to be negotiating in the interest of his own country. And any politician would be vulnerable to the charge at home that he gave away the store because of non-national interest factors. So he'll certainly be doubly attentive to ensure that he doesn't fall over backwards to please India, and I think we should expect that.
Right. Do you think the Indo-UK trade deal could get an impetus with his appointment as Prime Minister? And the reason why I ask you, sir, is because there is a sentiment that UK must get its share of the pie in the trade deal. There must also be some amount of curbs on mobility of Indians from India to the UK for work purposes, for professional reasons. And what most recently Suella Braverman, the former UK Home Secretary, said, and she was in a way pulled up by the UK administration for that Indians are the largest group of overstayers in the UK. So how would he address that sentiment? How do you expect him to approach the trade deal with India at a time when UK is in so much of economic turmoil?
Now, I think those concerns will remain on the table, and we'll also negotiate pretty hard from our side, because for us, you know, it's all very well that they want to sell us Scotch whiskey or automobile spare parts or whatever, but we in turn, one of our biggest exports has been talent, and we do want, for example, our students to be able to stay on after their studies, to work, earn some money, gain some expertise, and then come back to India. And we'll want the conditions that make it possible to do that. So there will be some tough negotiating. I don't see either side suddenly softening because there's an Indian origin Prime Minister. I think we have to understand that in our own country, We have national interests. We're going to negotiate trade agreements in our national interest, and they're going to negotiate trade agreements in their national interest. In fact, it takes the enthusiasm of someone like a Johnson saying we'll have the deal done by Diwali and so on. I don't think an Indian Hindu Prime Minister would ever use that kind of deadline, because it means a lot more to him than it does to the rest of his people. So please understand, I think we must give Rishi Sunak his space as a British Prime Minister and not keep pushing him as an Indian who happens to be in 10 Downing Street, or as I was tempted to call it, 10 Browning Street now.
Right. And my final question, sir, if you were to give a piece of advice to Rishi Sunak, especially on keeping the UK economy on track, what would that be? Because it seems to be critical to his tenure as Prime Minister.
Look, I wouldn't presume to do this because he actually knows more about the British economy than I do or you do, Parikshit. He's been dealing with it hands-on till just 2 months ago. And so I would expect that he would be able to hit the ground running. That's another reason why they voted for him, the Tory MPs, because they saw that here's a guy who was actually considered a very effective Chancellor of the Exchequer. And now they're giving him a chance to continue where he left off. So I think that he doesn't need my advice, and nor should we presume to give him that. I think we should let him keep cracking. I certainly do believe that once he has taken the necessary steps to stabilize the British economy and the British pound, that he should then certainly pay attention to the trade agreement, because there was a lot of optimism about the trade agreement when I was in Britain earlier this summer. Just a few months ago in June, I visited both the Houses of Parliament and talked to a number of MPs, and they were very, very gung-ho, and that's actually become a good deal less optimistic since that visit just 4 months ago. So I'd like to see that pick up once again, and that will involve a bit of give on both sides, but probably more on their side, because the kind of concerns that Suella Braverman mentioned, if that's going to be the dominant thing, then that'll be a deal breaker for us, because if we can't let our people go there, then why do we want to give them the concessions they seek?
All right, so that was Shashi Tharoor telling us that mobility will be critical when it comes to India-UK FTA, and Rishi Sunak clearly has some challenges cut out. We're going to take a short break, but up next we will discuss the key economic challenges that Sunak faces as he takes charge. We will be joined by Richard Heald of the UK-India Business Council and also Professor Scott Lucas from University College Dublin. He will be joining us in just a bit. Don't go anywhere. This special show continues.